and urban members, just how you would square all of that.
I guess it's important to note that I don't think that there's a perfect solution to the problem, because the challenges that both of those members face are uniquely different. And so will there ever be the perfect balance? It seems unlikely, but I think to strive to recognize the differences is critical. I think many urban MLAs would also have multiple offices, and so there is unique costs associated with that. I'm of the opinion that urban MLAs can increase staffing in a way that helps deal with some of those challenges with respect to interacting with marginalized communities that we sometimes see in urban areas greater than rural areas, more expensive than in rural areas. And so there is this delicate balance. But I think that it is imperative that the Commission undertakes this balancing in a way that recognizes the unique challenges that rural MLAs face. And I also think that it's fair to say that rural MLAs, not on volume, but often on per capita, would share similar challenges with marginalized communities, whether it's AISH, access to housing, or other concerns. And so sometimes it's easy to believe that those problems don't exist in rural Alberta, and I think that it's important to be reminded that those offices also deal with those concerns and challenges. And so we need to recognize that they also deal with delicate communities.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cooper, I want to drill down on a couple of things that you said, not by way of correction, but I hope by way of clarification. You made the point that no rural riding should be above the average. Did I understand you that correctly?
Yeah, I think that.
Okay, so let's just leave it at that.
Yeah.
What we're struggling with is terminology and changes to the Alberta landscape. And you've come out as a nerd by acknowledging that you read Appendix D. Yeah. You're the first person, I think, in the public that's admitted that. It warms the author's heart, I can assure you. But Alberta isn't rural and urban anymore. And that's what I think we learned by going through the history and traveling this province. There's mushy middle stuff. And so let me use this example. Would you consider Leduc-Beaumont rural?
Well, I used to joke with Minister Horner that the definition of a rural MLA is whether or not you had a Starbucks in your constituency. And so Leduc-Beaumont wouldn't fall into that category.
Okay, okay.
But I think in my opening remarks, I didn't address the sort of rest of Alberta, the Red Deers, the Lethbridges, the Grand Prairies, and I see MLA Nolan Dick is here. I'm sure he has some feelings about Grand Prairie. And so I'm sympathetic to your position that constituencies like Old Stidsbury, Three Hills are shrinking in terms of the total number that exist like that because of these sort of urban, this cross between rural and urban constituencies. Even, Sylvan Lake is quite urban and so we walk these fine lines of the rest of or in the middle. And I think, Leduc-Beaumont is a good example of a hybrid riding from my perspective, because much of its commerce is done inside the capital. And so I don't think that that's a true definition of a rural riding, but, and that's also why I'm comfortable with the lines of urban municipalities being blurred a little bit into some more what we would consider to be rural constituencies.
Okay, thank you. One last, maybe difficult question. You've served in an independent capacity in the legislature as well as in a partisan capacity. From your perspective as former speaker, how valuable is a report from this commission that is unanimous as compared to one that isn't?
I think the commission and each of you as commissioners have an important part to play in the final report. And if there are certain things that the commission decides that members of the committee don't agree with, I think it's important that Albertans know that this is a difficult process, and to arrive on an unanimous decision is a challenge. And I don't think that any commissioner should feel discouraged from writing a minority report or expressing the areas of the report that they agreed with and areas that they didn't. I mean, I think it would be wonderful if it could be unanimous in arriving at a position, particularly in light of the fact that 2 members were appointed by members of the opposition caucus and 2 members were appointed by the government caucus. And, you know, anytime we can get political foes, if you will, to agree is good modeling for members of the assembly and political discourse more broadly. That said, I think that political discourse can be done in a way that's meaningful, respectful, and logical. And if the report is unanimous, provided that it's done in those ways, I think it's a reasonable position for the committee or the commission to have.
Well, thank you very much, and I knew that was a hard ball I threw you, so thank you for your answer.
That's nothing compared to U.S.-Canada relations.
Okay.
Can we ask about that?
I tell, in light of that, this is even more important, I invite presenters to stay to hear the other presenters to get a perspective. So please, we invite you to stay, and I know you probably have other demands, but during the break, I'm sure there's people that would love to pick your brain on what you're doing now.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Catherine Joel. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
Please make yourself comfortable and identify yourself and tell us what electoral division you are living in and which ones you wish to comment on.
Yeah, my name is Catherine Joel. I live in Edmonton, Strathcona. I live in Allendale. So I want to really comment on urban Edmonton. I first of all wanted to thank you for your work on the 2025 interim report and for its careful principled application of the concepts of communities of interest and effective representation. I wanted to in particular thank you for the decision to avoid hybrid ridings and to keep municipalities and established communities intact, which promotes clear, understandable boundaries and preserves shared social, economic, and civic interests. Your approach strengthens voters' ability to engage meaningfully with their elected representatives and supports effective representation in practice. I think the Commission has also appropriately applied the constitutional principle of effective representation by reallocating seats to reflect population growth in Edmonton and Calgary, while reducing representation in areas experiencing population decline. The interim report advances relative parity of voting power and ensures Albertans have equitable access to legislative and constitutional representation. It's important that this population-based adjustment be preserved in the final report. I guess I would also encourage the Commission to continue recognizing that growth in Edmonton is not limited to suburban areas. I live in Allendale, near the center of the city, and I run a small business downtown. I have a small cooking school located on the McEwen campus. From both perspectives, I personally see ongoing residential, commercial, and economic growth in the urban core. In my own neighborhood, this includes infill developments, basement suites, new apartment buildings. Downtown is also continuing to grow. I think these changes increase density and complexity in central neighborhoods, and the assumption that growth is occurring primarily on the periphery can risk undervaluing the representational needs of urban communities. So I guess in this context, the proposed removal of Edmonton Riverview did catch my attention. I know there's a lot of building going on in that community also. I do believe that maintaining core ridings will help ensure that central neighborhoods continue to have representation that reflects our specific needs. But overall, the interim report reflects a balanced, legally sound, and forward-looking approach to electoral boundaries. So I respectfully thank and encourage the Commission to maintain these principles in the final recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Much appreciated. Your cooking school, what's the name of it?
It's called Get Cooking.
Oh, okay. I drive by one every time I go
Okay.
to elections, Alberta, so.
Come to a class.
Questions, Mr. Clark?
No questions beyond a thank you for being here, and
Thank
we
you.
appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like how Mr. Clark's remarks.
Dr.
Really,
Martin.
I'm glad you came. I'm glad you think that overall the interim report is good.
Thank you.
And I'm glad you've read it.
Thank you.
Did you read Appendix D, though?
No, I'm sorry.
There's a test on the way up.
Ms. Sampson?
Thank you for coming out. I appreciate your comments.
Thank you very much.
Sean?
Thank you. I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you
Mr.
very
Well,
much. Yeah.
I've been meaning to say this about the Edmontonian presentation. I mean, we've traveled the province and we've been in communities, and every community has its own sense of pride of ownership or pride of community. And I must say, for a you know, I have not spent a lot of time in the last 30 years in Edmonton. But I have stopped referring to Edmonton as in northern Alberta as a result of this commission. And I think maybe somebody presenting later will appreciate that. But I am very impressed with the very collegial pride that Edmontonians have almost universally presented, both first round and this round. So, and you exemplify
Thank you.
that. So thank you very much.
I'm not from here, but I love living here. Edmonton is amazing. Thank you.
So I'll excuse you from the table, but please
Thank you.
remain to hear, if you're able, to the other presentations.
Will do. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you.
Our next presenter, Nolan Dick.
Well, it is a pleasure to be here today. Thank you so very much for being here and allowing me also to step in. I'm the MLA in Grand Prairie, and I am very much looking forward to our conversation here today. I do have a few things, just for context. One, I know it's been a huge amount of work for you with this commission. I know it's been at points contentious, but thank you for doing the work for Albertans. It is important work that you do, and it has long and interestingly lifelong implications for all Albertans, so thank you. So I'm going to speak on a couple subjects here. One is just Grand Prairie itself. I'm going to talk about the rural-urban conversation, and then I also want to specifically talk about Northern Alberta for a moment too as well. So that I'm going to wrap my comments around kind of those three things. It sounds like those are also kind of where the conversation has gone here so far. In regards to this whole thing, my conversation really goes around effective representation. As some prior conversation has said, representation should reflect the work required to serve a riding, not just the head count. And to be clear, that is a geographical question. Obviously, there's a head count question in there that you guys are looking at. But representation is, as has previously been mentioned by prior people, it is a geographical, it is a conversation around representation and relationships, and also government bodies. And I just want to highlight a couple of those in general across Alberta. For instance, I represent a Timbit in Northern Alberta. I have a very unique riding. I only have 2 quarters of rural riding. I am completely urban in Northern Alberta. My counterpart around has about a quarter of the city, give or take, of Grand Prairie. What we represent would be equal to what all of the MLAs in Calgary would represent. I have multiple school boards. Well, they have 2. I also have 2. I represent potentially 3, depending on how you count. There is 15 councillors in Calgary. I have 9, but they have 26 MLAs. There are 2 of us for our city. Ish. I'm going to count a little high. But also, there's opportunity for multiple councillors to have multiple effective and elected representation on the provincial level, which one council, through a mayor, obviously, both similar style, similar official capacity have the same. But the amount of relationships that rural MLAs are managing is significant. To the point, many people have 5+ counties. Some have, in my counterpart, MLA Weeb, I believe he has 4 different school divisions. He has 8 to, I apologize, I didn't fully count. I believe he has 8 different councils, plus Grand Prairie. And he has also multiple distances to drive. It's about 3 hours across the constituency. Those are variables in the conversation to effective representation that I think should also be, they have an elected right. I just want to talk about elected officials for a moment. They have an elected right by their municipalities for access to government services and to represent their constituents' needs as well on a municipal level. That is a distinct need for rural Alberta in a different way than a city has. Obviously, there's a population count. But each one of those municipalities has unique needs and unique conversation for an MLA to represent. So it's multifaceted. I just want to point that out. In regards to Grand Prairie, I just want to talk about also the rural-urban reality. And I'm going to speak from my perspective right now. As a mid-sized city MLA, engaging in rural aspects of constituency, which I do not represent, is actually part of my job. And I'll explain this way. Many people live in my constituency that work outside. We have significant gas assets, we have significant agricultural assets, and significant agricultural assets from outside the city. Grand Prairie is the hub of the community. We represent roughly a catchment area of 300,000 people. And so we have services for significance there. But in my official capacity as an urban MLA, I often talk about homelessness, mental health and addictions, healthcare, various other subjects too as well. But there's also representation of the workforce that is solely focused on technically rural issues, forestry, energy. So I've been able to help and have huge passion for the energy and forestry industry based around these things. And the reason we often, this would just be my perspective right now too as well, in regards to the conversation around the effective representation only in a city. Broadening that expansion and understanding rural and urban situations and problems is an asset to the MLA, because you understand the whole complexity and can understand a further complexity of our economics across this province. Not to be forgotten, Northern Alberta is an economic driver, but so is rural Alberta. And if you want to fully understand your job as an MLA, and not just for your constituency, but as an Albertan and representing holistically that aspect, that is an important aspect. And so I would be, I will stand behind it, that is, the rural-urban conversation representation in mid-sized cities is an important one that I think we should consider strongly because of the economics of it too as well. And then I've been building to this too as well, Northern Alberta, rural Alberta, but specifically Northern Alberta. The current plan to remove a seat in Northern Alberta does remove representation. And once again, we're talking about the complexities of being an MLA, the time of being an MLA, the logistics of being an MLA, the representation for other elected officials for an MLA. Those are all aspects, and other nations. Northern Alberta predominantly has most of the non-urban or very close to urban centers, nations. Those require also representation, and that's important for all northern MLAs. And for clarity, I don't have a nation in my constituency, but I believe every single other northern MLA does. And so those are important conversations that potentially a city MLA or predominantly urban MLA aren't going to have those dynamics at play. And it's also time. Time is not a bad thing, but it does add time into your life. And so I think we have some other complexities there in northern Alberta. And so my hope is that you would leave or build upon the amount of representation, not just based around headcount in northern Alberta, but upon the geographical, upon the elected, upon the, which I haven't touched on, service delivery, and also the economic impacts of this province on those elected conversations. As I've said, the economic contribution of northern Alberta is significant. And with that, and I'll just tell one quick story here. In my riding, there is significant investment from those that come, we call it shadow population, but also shadow business population, that comes to Grand Prairie to do business because their workforce is there, or just outside of my constituency, but their population lives in Grand Prairie. Those businesses meet with me because they need to know what's going on in Grand Prairie. So my workload, and this is across northern Alberta, we are working hard for our constituents, but we also work for other urban MLAs because the business is there. And that business is very important, and I think that there is an opportunity there too as well, because they are looking to know what's going on in the constituencies and how they can impact the community, sometimes financially, sometimes encouraging their company to be involved in different aspects. Hopefully I've been somewhat clear in my conversation, but geography, governance complexity, service delivery, economic contribution elected are all parts of this that I would contribute as important. And thank you for the time. I believe my 6 minutes ended maybe 2 or 3 times ago. So thank you for the time. But happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dick. You give an interesting spin on shadow population. Not a spin, but an interpretation that, we've talked about that a bit, but your perspective is, I think, new. And we did read the letter from the Northern MLAs, of which you were a signature.
Yep.
It was the first piece of feedback we heard. So thank you for that. Mr. Evans, any questions of this presenter?
No, thank you very much for your presentation and for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate the extra information. You spoke very well about your relationship being an urban, mostly constituency, and how you understand what's going on and speak for the rural. Can you explain to us your relationship with MLA Weeb and how you work together? Because he's the other side of the coin, where he is just a touch of urban and all rural.
Well, absolutely. Maybe I can talk about
in relationship, like, to the business of Grand Prairie.
Absolutely. So maybe if I take a step back, Grand Prairie is built upon 3 predominant industries: energy, agriculture, and forestry. There's a little bit of technology in there and some various other things, but those are the predominantly 3 industries that we have. We work well, and in fact, we share office space together, one to also cut down cost. But the relationship works well, not just because he understands Grand Prairie, but we are also able to advocate as a region and take our perspective a little bit larger than that. Northern Alberta works very well together. Our counties, our cities work very well together. And I always just joke that it's because it's cold outside and you have to be together in order to create warmth. But the reality is that there's a connectivity there because there is less people, but you go and find a community. But it's also the work aspect too as well. Grand Prairie produces a lot of work. Northern Alberta produces a lot of work. And so there's different opportunities and different cultural aspects there. As to how we work together, I was able to help him advocate for a new hospital for one of his small towns. Well, that helps Grand Prairie because it's actually it gives the opportunity for our hospital in the future to not be one of the only landing zones for emergencies. That's super important. And he was able to advocate with me to start a new medical school. So we have a joint view that the important things in the region can be able to be moved forward collectively, which often are contrary. or at times can be contrary to, not just politically, but maybe a different MLA has a different thought on something. But those even those non-partisan things can be very well worked together as a region. And so that's I guess where I think our partnership has gone really well in representing. And I'm not going to ask also if somebody has a problem and I know them. Oh, you live across the street,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That it just doesn't meld that way in Grand Prairie. You're Grand Prairiean. If somebody comes or from outside of Grand Prairie, oh, my business is in Grand Prairie. If I said that, it would be instantly a refusal of government to help. That doesn't make sense in northern Alberta. So there's a cross-pollination of being willing to engage.
Yeah, thank you. That's an excellent answer.
Dr. Martin?
Thank you. I have much appreciated your very rapid-fire description of the number of municipalities and school boards and the like that you and your immediate colleague have to deal with. And the portrait that you and several other presenters have given us is that of what we call it laminated governance. And you have to be involved and appear to be involved throughout that whole stack all the time. So it occupies virtually all your time when you're back in your own riding. And I wanted to ask, we're inclined to make a recommendation about the budgeting that's provided to Members' Services Committee on behalf of the MLAs, because we've heard a fair bit about the complexity of staff work, which is exactly involved in the logistics of that stack, that laminated stack of relationships with municipalities and who knows what. So can you speak to the issue of your own personal staffing budgets and how this constrains your work?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll just speak as an urban MLA. I would say that some of the challenges come in because there is more casework often as an urban MLA. But where the difference between myself and when I'm chatting with MLA Weeb, who's predominantly rural, is that his logistics, then all of a sudden, what do you do for a staff? Well, there's not really a huge budget for travel. What do you do for overnight trips? If all of a sudden you have a big constituency, if you have meetings and have to, for Minister Williams, if he has to go to one side of his constituency, there's only limited hotel space. If you're on the Crete and you have to go down to the other side, well, that's 3 hours and you have 6 hours of meetings. Is it reasonable to put in a 12-hour day? Well, we do it. But it's also sometimes you're tired and you're like, I need to get a hotel room, but there's a limitation on that throughout the year. And so the budgetary limitations on staff also, they wouldn't be able to come because I don't have a budget for some of those travel things, especially in larger rural constituencies. In my constituency right now, it's 20 minutes across. I'm not getting a hotel room. But in larger constituencies, there's a logistical problem even for you. Are you going to, for everyone on the commission who lives out of town, you probably have a hotel room, and that's appropriate after a long day of work. But for us, we would have to travel back home. And so I think there's some of that as well. Is there an expectation for staff to come along? I would love a staff member, but I'm often solo for those so that we can actually be more effective together. And then also just the casework load. There is lots of work to be done, and that's the challenge. So part of it's staffing dollars. Part of it's you have to be careful as an MLA because you are responsible for any overtures personally for those budgetary concerns, unlike a ministry. You go to Treasury Board and ask. So there's no contingency of, hey, I actually need an extra staff, but I either have to then underpay them or I can't maybe get them to do the work because there's not enough budget to give them full capacity. So sorry for the long answer, but there is some complexities in there, but I can see the challenges myself, yes.
Thank you.
There are many things that we wish we had control over. That's
Absolutely.
one of them, perhaps having more than 89 seats to work with. But I think just to build a bit on what Dr. Martin was saying, if we look at how we address some of the unique challenges of the North, Grand Prairie is North, undeniably.
Absolutely.
But as you say, there's North, and then there's like North, right? Like there's, there are some even grander challenges for some of your colleagues, which you've outlined and they've done a fantastic job in also telling us about too. So we've heard that loud and clear. But I think one of the things we wish we had as part of our toolkit, we don't, but we can strongly recommend to the legislature is for member services to provide a substantial differential, actually. It doesn't replace an MLA. Having another office, another staff member is not an MLA, but it's part of the way there. It's one of a series of potential solutions, or at least, you know, tools to do that. So again, I say that just empathizing with the unique challenges of being a Northern MLA. You talked a bit about growth in the region. And it's good to see that there has been some growth. Our numbers show about 10% since the last boundary commission happened. So absolute growth has happened. Relative growth, it's about half the pace of the rest of the province.
Yep.
And that is a bit of a challenge, you know, as things shift. And so in the interim report, the upshot of it is those 10 northern constituencies are on average about 10% smaller than the average, whereas the previous boundaries, 2017, were actually only about 8.4%. So not like this is only a mathematical exercise, but just know that we have, in our struggles with how we address this, we have tried to address this to some degree. And having said that, we also have heard loud and clear from the north that we really do need to relook at how we've laid things out. So I just wanted to say all of that. So my question then is, the shadow population you mentioned, you feel like we should accommodate for that and count those folks even though they're not eligible voters? Is that a fair statement?
There needs to be, let me put this in context. Let's just use our hospital, for instance. The shadow population around Grand Prairie, Fort McMurray, Slave Lake, High Prairie, utilizes that hospital. Now you can say that other places too as well, but it is because they're working there a significant portion of the year on shift. They are coming to Grand Prairie. And so when somebody does get hurt, we will be responsible for them, and I'm proud of that. We want to service anyone that gets hurt. That's appropriate. We're not going to gatekeep healthcare. That's ridiculous. But the shadow population then all of a sudden becomes a part of the services that we offer and we have to represent. If it becomes purely a numbers game, then the services are weighted maybe to those that live there versus actually those that are utilizing services. And I think that that's an interesting question. So shadow population in Fort McMurray, I mean, it's in the tens of thousands. So that would actually add a couple seats potentially to Fort McMurray if you count those in. I think there does need to be some weight put onto that because at the end of the day, I still represent those people and those predominantly, and I'll say this maybe a way to say those people that hire those people for the area. They haven't moved in, but they are using services a percentage of the year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for presenting and for bringing the perspective of your region of the province. And again, I welcome you. I know you're a busy guy, but if you are able to stay to hear other presenters, please remain.
Thank you so very much for your work here, and thank you for listening today and asking your questions.
Okay. And keeping with the Grand Prairie theme, Adam Woods. Is Adam Woods present? Nope. Brianna Morris. Good afternoon, and please identify the riding you live in and what districts you wish to comment on.
I live in Strathcona, Sherwood Park, which I'd mostly like to speak about, but also just talk generally about representation in Alberta.
Okay.
Good afternoon. So I spent most of my childhood and early adulthood actually in the riding of Calgary-Lougheed. And while completing my master's degree in political science at the University of Calgary, I married a farm boy from Saskatchewan. In 2015, he and I moved to Fort Saskatchewan. A few years later, we bought a home in Sherwood Park, and in 2022, our family moved to the riding of Strathcona Sherwood Park, where we now live happily on an acreage near Uncas. In the 10 years since moving to the greater Edmonton region, I can recall visiting Beaumont 3 times, once for a wedding, and twice to meet a colleague who lives there for coffee. I nearly made it a 4th time during a leisurely motorcycle ride, one that ended with me in the ditch off Township Road 502, just west of Highway 21. The ambulance took me to the Leduc Community Hospital, not to Strathcona Community Hospital. I share this because it illustrates something important. the natural transportation corridors and daily rhythms of life for residents of Strathcona County simply do not lead to Beaumont. It's not a place we routinely go. I work in Edmonton, and while I occasionally shop or attend events here, most of my daily life, gas, groceries, church, children's programs, happens within our Dawson or Sherwood Park. For these reasons, I disagree with the proposal to include half, or any portion, of the City of Beaumont in the riding of Strathcona-Sherwood Park. Even through my limited visits, it's clear to me Beaumont is a beautiful, vibrant community. It deserves representation from someone more familiar with it than a resident of Strathcona County is. While I'm admittedly not familiar with the daily patterns of life for Beaumont residents, I can't imagine why they would go to Sherwood Park when the amenities of Edmonton South Common are closer. I appreciate the difficult task this commission faces, and I hope that you can still accommodate feedback from Strathcona County residents like myself about how community linkages play out in practice. I'd now like to spend my time discussing representation more generally, not with my Strathcona County resident hat on, but my political science hat. I strongly disagree with those beseeching the Commission to strictly apply the principle of representation by population count. I appreciate the Commission's recognition of the challenges inherent in representing geographically large ridings. Rural ridings should have smaller populations than urban ones. I say this as someone who worked as a political staffer for several years, serving both rural and urban MLAs. The scheduling logistics involved in meeting constituents are simply not comparable. To illustrate, using Google Maps, the distance from the northernmost point of Calgary-Currie to its southernmost point is a 9-minute drive. West to East is 8 minutes. Contrast that with Peace River-Notley. Without even considering the furthest extremes, the drive between Manning and Fox Creek is 3 hours and 18 minutes. I'm not suggesting rural MLAs work harder than urban MLAs. Effort varies from person to person. But for an MLA who wants to be present in their community, the practical demands of a large rural riding are inherently greater. Rural MLAs have the same 24-hour day as everyone else, and community events do not conveniently spread themselves out to make attendance possible. An urban MLA can feasibly attend several riding events in the same evening. That's not possible when the events are 3 hours apart. During my political science studies, I enjoyed exploring theories of representation, especially in a Canadian context. The interim report refers extensively to the concept of effective representation and highlights both the legislative role and the ombudsman role of elected representatives. Serving as an ombudsperson essentially means acting as a problem solver and advocate. In your deliberations as a commission, I encourage you to place less emphasis on population count when doing so undermines this key advocacy portion of representation. Provincial issues tend to vary more from municipality to municipality than from neighborhood to neighborhood. Consider Hanna, Alberta. When the coal phase-out was accelerated in 2015, the town lost 200 full-time jobs, 7.5% of its population. Proportionally, that would be the equivalent of Edmonton losing 65,000 jobs or Calgary losing 92,000. If such an economic shock occurred in Edmonton or Calgary, multiple MLAs would share the responsibility of advocating for those affected. The employees would live all throughout the city in different ridings. In a rural riding, they live and work in the same, usually, other than what MLA Dick just said. And one MLA shoulders that burden while also serving other communities spread across a large geographic area. Representation is not only about legislating and voting in the Assembly. When it comes to policy making and decisions about where infrastructure is most needed, the government is supported by a skilled public service that conducts research and province-wide consultations. Political caucuses and parties do their own research and consultations too. MLAs are not the sole channel through which constituents can provide legislative or policy feedback. Even if they were, a thoughtful MLA knows that among their 50,000 constituents, positions on policy are neither cohesive nor fully knowable. They won't be able to vote in a way that makes all their constituents happy. Responsible MLAs understand they are more than a trustee acting solely on their own conviction, but personal judgment is part of the equation. It's about making informed statements and decisions grounded in strong engagement with constituents and other levels of government. And there's simply no substitute for in-person interaction or seeing a place firsthand. That becomes exponentially harder as ridings grow geographically. There is no substitute for an MLA in the meaningful work of physically showing up and having presence in classrooms to teach students about democracy and at community events that knit a riding together. An MLA cannot send a public servant from an Edmonton office tower to a Canada Day parade on their behalf. Finally, we all know the phrase no taxation without representation. Rural Albertans pay the same income tax rates as urban residents, yet geography inherently limits their access to essential public services, particularly healthcare, which accounts for close to half of provincial government spending. Given this disparity, it's reasonable to expect some understanding when rural ridings have smaller populations. Acknowledging the access challenges faced by the people and families who grow our food is a small gesture of reciprocity. My goal in presenting here today is to embolden this commission that there is public support for boundaries that support multiple forms of representation. Not all Albertans are fixated on numerical parity. Geography shapes daily life, access to public services, and an MLA's ability to meaningfully advocate for the people they serve. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Questions, Mr. Clark?
No questions beyond a word of thanks for coming in. Very much appreciate your presentation. Thank you.
Dr. Martin?
We've heard a very great deal about the
Dr. Martin?
different, and indeed the previous speaker, about the complexity of relationships and expectations on an MLA and on their constituency staff as well, because of the tighter range of relationships between municipalities and school board trustees and 4-H clubs and school boards, and it goes on and on and on and on. And so there's a cultural expectation, let's put it that way, of a high degree of presence from the MLA and his immediate staff, and it's because of that then that and the geography issues and the logistics involved there, that you think we should not feel compelled to look for population parity with the urban areas. Is that a fair summary?
Yep, that seems quite accurate, yes.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sampson?
No questions, but thank you for coming out.
My pleasure.
No questions. Very much appreciated your presentation.
Evans?
Ms. Morris, we cannot
Sure.
definitively say what the future will hold in terms of our final report, but we get the sense of our arranged marriage of Beaumont and Strathcona has not been, may not survive.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You're excused, and I'd be, if you're able to stay, maybe not, but interested to talk to you about your political science studies and how that affects what you just brought to us. So.
Thank you.
Our next presenter, Alexander Dowsey. We are moving right along on time here, so.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Alexander Dowsey. I live in the riding of Edmonton, Highlands, Norwood. I'm in more of the Norwood end. But I'm here to talk today actually about naming more than anything else. I'm a historian. I come from a family of historians. It's always been one of my passions. I suppose I've earned a new badge of nerddom having come to speak at one of these commission meetings now, so I'll add that to my collection. But I wanted to speak today with regards to the naming of several of the ridings proposed by the commission, specifically about the use or overuse of cardinal directions in the naming of many of the ridings in Edmonton in recent years. I understand, especially in smaller urban areas which are comprised of only 1 or 2 ridings, it makes sense to use cardinal directions to provide some differentiation between those two. But in a large urban area, especially a large established urban area like Edmonton, with very complicated definitions of what constitutes the cardinal points in the city, it can become impractical and confusing both for voters and representatives to understand where exactly those lie, and it doesn't necessarily really reflect the communities that they represent either. Furthermore, as this city continues to expand, the precise location of its cardinal points changes constantly, creating further issues resulting on relying on them principally for names. I think we've all been in the position at least once or twice in our lives as Edmontonians where someone resurrects the perennial debate about where North Edmonton and South Edmonton are. And the answers that people provide to that often demonstrate most clearly why relying on cardinal directions in a fast-growing and diverse city is unreliable at best. If you follow the postal designations, then where I live in the inner city is considered northwest. I'm barely north of the urban core, and I'm firmly east of it, which is rather confusing. If you go by the river, then places like Edgemont and the Uplands are considered being in the north, despite being as far south as Mill Woods. It's very subjective and interpreted very differently by the general public. If we have the opportunity to tie a riding's name to a distinguishable feature, a development area, a geographical landmark, or a historical or cultural connection, then I think it's important that we do. It makes ridings easier to recognize, it gives the public a greater ability to place ridings geographically, and gives them more certainty and connection to place, rather than a broad cardinal direction does. I did a written submission for the Commission a while back, and I gave a few examples of what that could look like for ridings which have been proposed in the interim report, focusing on riding names which rely in part or in full on cardinal directions. In the cases of places like Edmonton Southwest and Southeast, I suggested using the names of residential and development areas, which are fully encompassed by the proposed boundaries, Edmonton Windermere and Edmonton Degoteau, respectively. For places like Edmonton West Henday and Edmonton South, I suggested things like local geography, Edmonton Kinokamau, the lake which sits between the major residential areas of the proposed boundaries of West Henday, and Edmonton Blackmud, as the proposed boundaries of Edmonton South include much of the southern course of the Blackmud Creek, as well as the community that shares its same name. And lastly, for Edmonton Northwest and the new proposed boundaries of Edmonton West Enoch, I suggested names which tie into their historical and cultural connections. Edmonton Grand Trunk, an homage to the history of many of the neighborhoods in Northwest Edmonton as a crossroads of cross-Canadian railways, and Edmonton Muskokosik, the Cree name for the Enoch Nation. I hope that this provides some food for thought. I know it's not a very exciting topic, but one that I'm particularly passionate about, and I hope you give it consideration. Even if it is a rather mundane issue, it really helps, and I can say from some experience volunteering in several elections, voters to know where exactly that they are in the electoral landscape. I have had many challenges with friends who live in South Edmonton who are confused which of the Edmonton South ridings they live in, because it's not easily distinguishable right off the bat. It also gives them a chance to develop their own identity and carry that history forward. Edmonton Highlands Norwood is a great example of that. Norwood hasn't been the name of my neighborhood in many, many decades. It was renamed Alberta Avenue with the renaming of 118th Avenue, but it remains part of our riding's history and legacy, and certainly an integral part of our identity as a community. I certainly think of myself as a resident of Norwood myself. So I just think it might be an exciting opportunity to introduce that when we're considering the naming of ridings. I want to thank you all, of course, for all of your hard work on this. I know it's been a sort of marathon time every time you have to redistrict the whole province. It comes with challenges every time as well, but thank you so much for your time here today.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you for focusing on, it is part of our mandate, names, but it's the third, and it's the forgotten part of our mandate. So I trust that your presentation is all encapsulated in your written submission.
Yes, yes,
Good.
almost verbatim, basically.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for that reminder, and it's most helpful, and it'll be of assistance. Any questions, Mr. Evans?
What are your thoughts on the naming policy that the city used in terms of the various wards?
Oh, I thought it was quite interesting, and I thought it was a great opportunity also to invite Edmontonians to learn more about our history as a city. I know it's something that I often describe it to people, that the history of Edmonton, you have to scratch beneath the surface to really find it, but there's actually a lot of richness there, and especially incorporating names that incorporated episodes in Edmonton's history, Nakota Iska, for example, others that are owing to the history of Inuit communities coming to Edmonton for treatment for tuberculosis, which is long out of the living memory of the city. It was a fascinating experience. Or Edmonton Métis, the ward where I live, has a very large First Nations and Métis community in it. That might not be a history that people might know much about. Names are a way, and have been a way in Alberta's tradition of carrying on that history, whether it's been the names of figures or historic neighborhoods. I think it's actually a really fascinating way to get people involved in that identity, even if it's not necessarily our top of mind thing when we're thinking about renaming places. I know it's sometimes a little infuriating to experience the thing that you've always known as one name being changed to another one, but it presents opportunities as well, and I think that's broadly been the experience of a lot of folks as Edmonton's new names have
Would
gone
that be
forward.
applicable here in light of your concern about the confusion that the names can result in as it relates to the electorate.
Mm-hmm. Oh, certainly. And I think also it's, you know, it's part of that kind of like buy-in, that interplay, our conversation with people when we're creating these areas is, I don't know if they necessarily find that same sense of connection if it's sort of more generic name. Edmonton Northwest could mean any number of areas, and whereas I know for folks, especially in the Lauderdale area where Grand Trunk Park sits now, that is something that is part of people's families' history there. So I think it would probably be a moment of some pride for families who are moving to those areas or who have lived there for generations to see that reflected in the name of the ridings that are representing them.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Sampson?
Can you comment on the difficulty that people like me have struggling with Indigenous names? Like when Edmonton went to that, did you get, do you have feedback on that concept? Because I noticed you have recommended for Enoch.
Yeah, I always think about it as in terms of perspective. If I was a first generation immigrant coming to this country, or maybe newly landed, I might struggle with some of our English place names, let alone any other place names that are around. That's always part of the challenge of just words in general. I think if we have the resources available to especially help folks phonetically. I know during several municipal elections, many campaigns include phonetic spellings and pronunciation guidelines for wards as an aid. But once it works its way into the lexicon, it's remarkably resilient. I mean, many Indigenous names have been long-standing names for places in Edmonton, like the Saskatchewan River itself, the word Saskatchewan being an Indigenous word originally, as the name of many of the rivers in our province. So I think it's one of those things that comes with repetition and persistence more than anything else. Yeah.
Excellent point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Martin?
Yeah, I quite take your remarks to heart, although obviously there's a great number of difficulties. I mean, you know, we've got this very lumpy situation. We've got districts in the province named after people. We've got districts named after big geographical features, Livingston. We have some, I'm just looking at a map of Edmonton, that's the same one, and I'm thinking, Edmonton Gold Bar, you know, that label's been around for quite a while, but you know, the Gold Bar neighborhood is just one little bit of that very large riding. So these things get awkward fast. And I'm not a great fan of having lots of hyphens, you know, that's sort of evading the problem. So I think we have to pick our spots. That may be as good as we get this time round. Thank you.
Yeah, this is the longest conversation we've had about names.
Yeah.
And thank you for this, because
Much
it is
obliged.
exactly as Justice Miller said, it is part of our mandate. And so, you know, part of, I'm thinking, I've gone in I feel like I've circumnavigated the city on the Henday here in my thinking. I've touched on a number of, as we talk here, but on one hand, clarity and understandability is a key part of our role here. So we want to try not to change things wherever we can avoid it. People are used to it. It may not be perfect by today's standards, but people know that name. Flip side is we have the opportunity to be bold, and we can do some of this stuff. And one of the things I would observe is in the past, one of the things that the legislature may choose to change from the report is names, one way or the other, right? So I wonder if we would approach that with maybe a little, I don't want to say lack of caution, but
Humility.
you know, yeah, humility, but also like, hey, you know what? We're just gonna, you know, based on, and the one caveat I would say is when we're talking about Enoch, we want to be very, very careful to not presume without hearing directly, and we really haven't, and that's part of that. That I think would be one distinction, but some of the other suggestions you have are interesting to me. So thank you so much for that, and I've marked it here. I've got your written submission up as well, and thank you very, very much.
Yes, thank you for that. And I made a note that generally in our recommendations, because I recall taking this job, I've had to read a lot of legislative material. And when the last report was tabled, there were a couple amendments to tweak to deal with names. And I think we just don't have the the time or to really delve down into this, but it would not offend me if an MLA made some amendments to properly name it after our report is released, and we should probably, give them, not as if we need to give them latitude, but certainly, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you.
Okay. David Billick?
In the hot seat. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon. We're
going to
only running
change
10
this.
minutes late, but don't let that pressure you at all, sir.
I think I'll be quick.
No.
Quick and to the point is my
No,
style.
do the same thing that you've heard me say numerous times.
Sure. I'm Dave Billick from Strathcona Shore Park. Hopefully your last presenter from Strathcona Shore Park on this matter. I'm just a resident there. I'm here to discuss maintaining our boundaries is the most mathematical and socially sound path forward for our community. The interim report proposes moving Heritage Hills out of our riding. I strongly disagree. Effective representation is best served when families and their local schools remain together. Moving Heritage Hills fragments the school catchment areas for Davidson Creek Elementary, Heritage Hills Elementary, and we urge the Commission to respect the status quo of the Clover Barred boundary our residents already navigate daily. And just another comment I just thought about, you were talking about hybrid ridings. We're the perfect example of a hybrid riding, where 50% of our population is represented in that strip on Clover Bar Road, and the rest of it is in the rural area. And the reason it works so well is because we're intertwined with our community. We have Strathcona Wilderness Center, we have all the amenities out in our Drawson, and we all share those things together with Shore Park and with Strathcona Shore Park. No time do we ever migrate over to Beaumont. But I just wanted to say a hybrid, it really works well in our situation. My second point, our riding currently has a population of 51,006. I want to draw our attention to the shovels in the ground reality of this population. We have 9,600 new residents already in the pipeline through two major developments. The Ardrossan expansion, according to the Strathcona County Ardrossan Area Structure Plan, the hamlet is being serviced to grow from a base of 1,200 to a target of 6,000 residents. The Hillshire subdivision, which I just drove by today, and they're working hard at it, per the Strathcona County Hillshire Local Improvement Plan, the 62-hectare project south of Y Road contains roughly 1,300 residential units projected to house 4,800 people. These developments alone represent a 19% increase in our current base. Even if you remove Heritage Hills, which is about 3,150 people, and then add Beaumont, which I estimate to be about 13,000, creates a massive net gain combined with our 19% organic growth. This riding will hit over 70,000 residents before the next boundary review. At 29.3% over the provincial average, you would be creating a riding that violates the statutory 25% limit. It is mathematically more stable just to leave the boundaries the way they are. Next, our identity is tied to the north and east, formalized by the Common Bonds Agreement with Fort Saskatchewan and our membership in Alberta Industrial Heartland Association. We must also listen to our neighbors there. The City of Beaumont has been extremely vocal in their opposition to this plan, with their council voting unanimously on December 9th, 2025 to reject this split. They share no social or economic connection with Shore Park. Forcing Beaumont into our riding dilutes the voice of the two distinct economic regions. Also, the solution to the Commission's population goals lies north, not south. Under Strathcona County's Municipal Development Plan, a northward urban expansion has been legally mandated. The scale of growth, Bremner is designed for a target population of 85,000 residents. Active development right next door to them on the north side of Highway 16, Aikenside and Cambrian Crossing are under construction right now, with Cambrian alone slated for 12,000 residents. Focusing on Sherwood Park's expansion on the northern corridor respects our legal blueprints and prevents unnecessary fragmentation of neighborhoods like Heritage Hills. Furthermore, if a precision adjustment is deemed mandatory, the town of Tollfield at approximately 2,100 residents is a superior alternative to Beaumont or Leduc County as it respects the Highway 14 and 21 corridor. However, we maintain that Tollfield should be considered as a last resort compared to the stability of our current map. In my conclusion, in summary, my strongest recommendation is just to leave the 2023 boundaries unchanged. Our current population growth trends provide overwhelmingly support maintaining the status quo to ensure we do not exceed the statutory variance limits in the coming years. If an addition is forced, the northern corridor, Bremner and Akenside, like I mentioned, and maybe Tollfield as a last resort, since they're in Beaver County and not Strathcona County, are the logical path forward. Finally, I just want to thank everybody here, the commission. I appreciate the hard work you're doing and extremely tough decisions that you need to make. And thanks for your commitment to listen to all of us Albertans.
Thank you very much. I missed, you said a council, I think unanimously rejected. Which council?
Beaumont's.
Oh, okay, sorry, I thought it was another, okay.
No.
Okay, any questions?
You know, just
Greg?
and thank you very much for that. Again, it's very much appreciated when citizens come in and participate in this process. It's you said the hot seat, so it can be a little intimidating. We try not to make it that way, but it's appreciated that you have taken the time to come out. And just for some context, one of the things we're struggling with, Alberta's growth has been so significant that although Strathcona, Sherwood Park, and Sherwood Park have both grown in absolute terms, they've grown at a relatively slower pace than the rest of the province. So Strathcona, Sherwood Park is about 7% larger compared to 20% for the province. Sherwood Park itself, 10%, so at about half the rate. So growth is happening. And part of the question I guess I have for you is it high density sort of, either low rise or certainly not high rise, but is it that sort of development that you're seeing, or is it more single family detached type development that you foresee?
I think it's more single family, but there are, your duplexes and fourplexes and such like that. But like I said, the numbers you might be looking at are in the rearview mirror. These are actually shovels in the ground going forward that council has approved, and you said would you say 7%? I stated it's probably closer to 19%. Our riding's going to improve just with those two developments alone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Martin?
Yes, thank you very much. I like the fact that you have lots of numbers, and they're very recent numbers, I take it.
Yes.
And I wanted to look at two bits of it. One is the Hillshire development, and you say that is slated for 1,300 units, give or take. Did you not?
Yep.
And so are those, is that a 3 or 4 story high? Does it include any of that kind of construction?
3 or 4 story. There's apartment buildings in there. There's, there are many of those in there, plus single family. It's a mix.
Okay, and that would characterize as well the other development that you specified with near Ardrossan.
Ardrossan, yeah.
So they too are going to have a mix.
They're having a mix as well, and they're slated to have 6,000 shortly, and then they've already got pre-approval for up to 10,000.
Right, and we're not even talking about Bremner, which is, I know they've scraped the ground.
Yeah.
But it's going to take them 30 years to.
It's going to take 20 years or so.
Yeah.
They've been already fighting for it for 30
And
years.
what's the other one? Cambrian.
Cambrian, right next door, where they already got the shovels in the ground.
Well, I happened to go by there
Yeah.
at some point in the autumn, and there are 500 single-family houses there. So
On the north
it's
side of
growing
Highway
very
16.
rapidly.
Yeah,
Okay,
we don't
thank
mess
you.
around out there.
Thank you.
Ms. Sampson?
No questions, but thank you for coming out. I appreciate your time today.
Mr. Evans?
No questions, but thank you very much.
Right. Thank all of you again as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brake? No? We're going to go over that. You're okay to work through the break?
We can, sure.
Okay. Our next presenter is Roxanne Carr.
The mayor is not here.
Okay, no? She's the mayor of Sherwood Park? Okay. Okay, Chelsea Belzen? Good afternoon.
Hi.
Please tell us where you're from and which ridings you wish to comment on.
Absolutely. I live within the boundary of the Edmonton West Enoch Electoral District.
Okay.
And I'll also be providing some feedback about the Edmonton West Henday district changes. If you'll humor me at the end, I'd love to speak about cardinal directions and naming because I have some feedback on that, but I didn't prepare that in my notes. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak to you today. It's my first time presenting to the commission, so this will be the first time you're hearing from me. I am the president of the Glastonbury Community League in West Edmonton. We serve the areas of Glastonbury, Granville, and the north part of the Hamptons communities. If anyone knows where the West End Costco is, that's the northwestmost edge of the area I'm talking about. Like all of the 160 leagues in Edmonton, our league is led by a group of dedicated volunteer community members who provide opportunities for Edmontonians in our area, including providing places of learning, culture, recreation, and education. I'm here under our mandate of advocating for our community. First, let me say that I appreciate the hard work and care the Commission has put into striking a balance between competing priorities. It's clear through the submissions, it's clear through what you're hearing here today, that there are so many factors that go into making these recommendations. I don't envy that job. I thank you for acknowledging and reacting to the huge growth that Edmonton has experienced and adding additional representation for our city. The areas of Edmonton around the outside of the Anthony Henday, where I live, have seen the most growth in Edmonton. To provide a bit of context, the communities that I represent began to be developed about 20 years ago. In that time, the League has built several playgrounds and a splash park. Housing development in our area is ongoing, and our League is in the process of building a rink and building a building for community programming. For further context, the 2021 federal census put the Glastonbury Community League catchment population at 13,560 residents, and we've had a number of high-density areas developed since that census. Our population will grow significantly again in the coming year or two as the final areas of the Granville neighborhood are built out. And yes, there is tieback on some of them already. The same is true of most, if not all, of the urban areas outside of the Anthony Henday, and specifically within this electoral district. That means that Edmonton West Enoch will quickly have a much larger population, and we're also in close proximity to the West Line LRT, which will be hopefully completed in 2028, and will continue to increase the desirability of our expanding area. The neighborhoods in the Glastonbury Community League catchment are directly adjacent to Enoch Cree Nation. We share valued connections. The League supports the nation's facilities by paying for our members to have access to the River Cree Twin Rinks for skating. And the nation supports our League with sponsorship and advertising in our community newspaper. There's also no doubt that we all depend on provincial and municipal infrastructure directly adjacent to the nation. I hope that much feedback is received from Enoch Cree Nation, its leadership, and its members, as they are best placed to comment on their inclusion in a majority urban riding versus rural. On the elements of Parkland County that have been included in Edmonton West Enoch, my opinion is that they do not have more in common with Edmonton residents than they do with those in Devon and the surrounding area. It's true that some may work in Edmonton. In my household, it's actually the reverse. We live in West Edmonton, but my husband works in Devon. He travels through the area that we're talking about in question daily and stops in Devon for things on the way home from work, uses some of the provincial infrastructure in Devon on occasion. As a family, we spend time in and travel through the area regularly, whether it be to go to a U-Pick, the corn maze, the botanical gardens, or get to the family cabin. We recognize when spending time in and traveling through this area that this is distinctly different from Edmonton, with differing wants and needs. Spending time in an area is not enough to demonstrate that you are aligned as a community of interest. Am I right to assume that this is the first urban-rural First Nations hybrid electoral district?
I think you are probably right.
Okay. So I have no doubt that combining a First Nations rural and urban riding together will cause a split focus for our MLA and dilute the representation of the residents in the riding. I'm concerned about an MLA being able to effectively represent the needs and concerns of three distinct different constituency groups. I understand that all MLAs need to represent a multitude of needs, but we're talking about hybrid riding that has 3 communities of interest with complex needs, not just 2. A solution to this dilution of representation would be to keep Edmonton West Enoch as a hybrid urban Edmonton First Nations riding, moving the Parkland County portion to Stony Plain, Drayton Valley, Devon. My final piece of feedback is on behalf of the area directly north of us, represented by the Lewis Estates Community League. So this is where we get into, if you look at where Enoch ends, and in that top right corner, that is half of the Lewis Estates neighborhood. The second half of it is in Edmonton West Henday. So, and today, in the 2017 districts, it's in Edmonton West Henday in its entirety.
Completely, yeah.
Yeah. The Edmonton Federation of Community Leagues provided feedback earlier in the process regarding the importance of keeping communities whole. In my conversations with the president of the Lewis Estates Community League, they are against being split between 2 ridings, as it would mean having to advocate with 2 MLAs and interacting with 2 constituency offices. As an organization responsible for advocacy for our residents, this hinders our ability to effectively represent our communities, and perhaps even more concerning and more importantly, can cause confusion among constituents. The communities of Rosenthal, Secord, Lewis Estates, and Glastonbury are well aligned. The West, we call ourselves West Henday. Realize we're not in the West Henday district in the new drawing of the map. But we have a lot of the same concerns. We're newer neighborhoods. We don't have the same infrastructure that other communities do. So there could be an opportunity to pull those communities all into Edmonton West Enoch. And my written remarks that I can provide show the boundary of what that could look like. That's the end of my formal comments, but on cardinal naming. So today, our riding is in Edmonton Southwest. And it's not easy to see here, but we're distinctly not south. My street name is Northwest on the end of it. I agree that the cardinal naming is confusing. And I definitely understand what you're saying about needing to have input and guidance from Enoch on whether we might use a Cree name in the new electoral district. But what a better way to create conversations. I have learned how to say Sipiwiniwak, which is my ward for Edmonton, and I know what that means, and it has meaning. So I think that thought, that idea is something that merits looking at. So in general, not a fan of the cardinal labels, and am open to the idea of, yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the various points that you've made. Much appreciated. Mr. Evans, any questions?
No questions.
Ms. Sampson?
Thank you, excellent presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Dr. Martin?
No, thank you.
Mr. Clark?
That's, yeah, I'm just reflecting a bit on it. You've covered a lot of ground. So did you say you have a map you can share with us and give to Mr. Roth?
I did, I did sort of indicate the areas that I was talking about with respect to the community issue of splitting the community, yes.
Perfect. Yeah, that's incredibly
Yeah.
helpful for us. So, yeah, it's in these high growth areas, it's
Yes.
quite a challenge for us to
For sure.
square the circle, if you will.
Yeah.
But yeah, your feedback is really very helpful, and thank you. Thank you very much for coming.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. That takes us to, we're way ahead of the game now. Boda Amar? No? Oh. Okay. Okay, that completes the formal list, although there's someone here that is wanting to present, and we've got the time, so it's perfect. AJ Wren, please come forward. And and identify yourself and tell us what electoral division you are residing in and which ones you wish to comment on.
For sure, thank you. I have 5 pages, and fortunately, these are the little pages.
Okay.
So, my name is AJ. I'm from Edmonton Northwest.
Last name?
Wren,
How do you spell that?
WRENN.
Okay.
And
Edmonton Northwest?
yeah, before I forget, I like the idea of calling it Grand Trunk. I love
really?
the cultural heritage names. That was something that when I was door knocking for my city councilor came up a few times, and I still remember the post on the Edmonton subreddit, people complaining about the names when I posted the playlist from the city of Edmonton and the pronunciation guide and the explanation of all the names. The videos that they made are awesome. If you don't know how to say it, highly recommend checking there because they're pretty brief and they do a nice job of explaining what it means. I may have cried when I looked up the one from my writing.
Okay.
So I'm going to mostly be speaking about Edmonton, so that's probably the best one to pull up on here. As far as the overall thesis, I feel like I'm going to be saying something that many of you have probably thought many times, and it was given the amount of population growth we've seen, doing your job with only being able to add 2 seats seems unreasonable. I have a little bit at the end talking about relative populations and what systems looked like a long time ago and how I feel like we've kind of fallen behind. Edmonton and Calgary are both among the fastest growing population centers in Canada, and the provincial government was even spending tax dollars inviting more people to come from other provinces. Now that the job market has been flooded and youth unemployment is rampant and the labor force participation rate is as bad as it's been since the 70s, it feels like Edmonton and Calgary are poised for poor representation. I think it's most obvious for Edmonton from the numbers. There are only 4 ridings in all of Alberta with over 61,000 people, all of which are in Edmonton. Edmonton is also one of the most prepared for population growth in Canada, with a large footprint and generally low population density. So with excitement from urbanists and chagrin from NIMBYs, Edmonton is also being a leader not only in Canada but in all of North America for being pro-development and reforming zoning laws. So not only are hundreds of thousands of Edmontonians now proportionally worse represented now, but based on growth and being the most pro-market zoning legislation in Canada, as well as having a city council that isn't afraid of building more, I think that will just get worse over time. And I can see all 4 of those ridings, McClung, West Henday, Riverview, and Northwest, all being well beyond the 65,000 in a fairly short period of time. At some point, if urban and suburban centers continue growing and rurals continue stagnating or shrinking, rural voters will effectively be shut out of politics, and I appreciate and understand that. According to growth trends, it isn't an if, it's just a when, and I think many rural folks would agree with me if I were to say that it's already happened. I don't think the solution is 5 more seats instead of 2, though having more seats to deal with would certainly solve a lot of the issues that people have brought up. I think one of the things that really needs to be considered is that Canada has a very unique demographic makeup, very unique geography and culture, but our governments don't really reflect that very well. Fair Vote Canada made a system called rural-urban proportional specifically to address this issue. I encourage everyone to look into it and consider it. I know that's not within the purview of your guys' decision today, but I think it's something that I wish I was singing to the choir on, and if that's just something that you guys consider in the future, I think that would be great. For comparison, in 1930, there was 63 legislators for under 300,000 registered voters. Cities used to have district-level, single transferable vote proportional representation, and other districts outside of cities used instant runoff voting. Over time, we simplified our voting process to first past the post, and I think that might have been a mistake. I hope that now in 2026, with the internet and AI, I'm confident that Albertans can do what they did 100 years ago and be able to make decisions by doing more than just like a single tick in a box. I think having some sort of changes to the system might really help that. I know one of the comments earlier was about having more people in offices. It isn't as good as having more representatives, but it's close. It made me think, okay, what are some comparable things that might have a mix of urban and rural like Alberta does? And I looked up Montana. They have a population of 1.14 million. They have 100 representatives and 50 senators. Edmonton on its own has 1.2 million people in it. So I also can't think of a place that talks more about being small government than the US. So if their states have much more representatives than we do with like a fraction of a population, I don't see why expanding our representation would be such a bad thing, especially when you look at how much growth there was in the 20s, 30s. They were adding new MLAs constantly and then taking them away. I do appreciate having a little bit more stability with the 8-year time frame, but if you look at the amount of MLAs that have been added in the last few decades relative to 50, 60 years ago, it's not comparable at all. Everyone, I think, is worse represented now than they were 5 decades ago, and I think, in my opinion, the biggest piece that needs to come out of this is we need a lot better representation or a lot more representation.
Okay. Thank you. You touched on some really good points. Just to not clarify, but to supplement, we operated in Alberta on 83 electoral divisions from 1986 to 2008. And that's 7 elections. But the public climate at that point was government cuts, live within your means, as I recall in my previous life. That's what the public wanted, and no expansion. So yeah, since 2008, we've only expanded 6 seats to the next election. So that's yeah. But comparatively, Montana's maybe a little bit of a stretch to compare, but
It was the closest thing I could find that proved my point.
Well, yeah, and it's in everybody's mind because of all the great TV series that come out of there lately. But comparatively, with our Canadian fellow provinces, we're not that far off the mark. I think we have a little bit of a study in there. So, but thank you very much for your presentation. Questions, Mr. Evans?
No questions.
Ms. Sampson?
No questions, but thank you. That was very interesting.
Dr. Mark?
I'm just having a thought experiment here. I mean, the whole business of what would constitute effective representation is very much on our minds all the time, all the different features that go into it and how it stacks up rather differently in different parts of the province, rural, downtown core, every suburbs. You know, there's lots of different ways to weight different factors. I mean, the city of Edmonton, what would you, in terms of effective representation, I take it that you are thinking largely of advocacy, opportunities of advocacy. So you want more MLAs. But equally, you know, what about, this is a thought experiment. We have no say over this kind of thing. But in terms of effective representation, which is your major concern, you know, you got 1 million people and you only got 12 councillors. What if you had, I don't know, twice as many councillors? Would that be an improvement in the effective representation of the people of Edmonton?
I feel like if our municipalities had more ability to make high-level decisions, that might be true. However, when I was learning a lot about the municipal issues that I thought were important, often the answer was, you know, why wasn't something done about this? Well, it's because it's actually up to the province to allow the municipality to make those decisions. So I think if the municipalities had more control over what they could do, I think that might be a good solution. But as things stand, I think there's too much red tape for municipalities to make a lot of the decisions that would be high impact.
Okay, thank you.
Good point.
It's a really interesting point, actually. We have had submissions in the last go-round from a former speaker, in fact, that wants fewer MLAs, interestingly enough. But I think your point is really well made and interesting about not just the number of MLAs and type of representation, but also the system. Unfortunately, those are not things we control.
Mm-hmm.
So we are put in the legislative box that we were knit into, and so unfortunately, you know, but we certainly can consider.
I know it's the wrong venue. I just want more people singing the same song as me.
And as I like to say, that Hansard is forever, and so this is now on Hansard, and so and part of the public record, and it is something we can consider as a recommendation to the legislature, and saying, you know, would we found this to be a better process if we had more members to work with? It could very well form part of our dialogue. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I appreciate the desire for cost savings, but I look at it more from like a macroeconomic view, in that if you're spending money on a big project and you're hiring foreign consultants, that money just kind of disappears. But if you're expanding the amount of representatives that you have, what are they going to be doing with their money? They're going to be spending it in Alberta, and you're kind of increasing the velocity of money. That's one of the things that I think a lot of places are struggling with right now, is that a lot of money is going from their community to elsewhere, and I don't see that same problem with political candidates, unless if they're parachute candidates from the other side of the country. But that's not here nor there, or from what I understand, very common in provincial politics anyways. So.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Wren. A most interesting presentation, and we have all taken note, and we'll see if we can make some form of recommendation along those lines.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And thanks for squeezing me in. I appreciate it.
No problem. I think we have 2 more presenters for the afternoon list, but they are absent, so they're not here yet. So we will take a break. 10, 15 minutes, maybe.
See what happens, see who shows.
Okay, be back here at 3:45.
reds and blues, and we both know it all comes down to green. Standing on the edge of town, the sun ain't coming up or down, and we're all stuck here somewhere in between. Out here in the middle, familiar ground I fear. Love ain't such a riddle. If we can't give a little, we can't get there from here. Working hard and paying dues, but in the end you have to choose. You lead, you follow, or get left behind. Sometimes I can't sleep at night. The market's down and money's tight. How much do you pay for peace of mind? Out here in the middle, familiar ground I fear. Love ain't such a riddle. If we can't give a little, then we can't get there from here. We all live in a world that's so demanding, and all we want is love and understanding. Out here in the middle, familiar ground I fear. Love ain't such a riddle. If we can't give a little, then we can't get there from
The map and how, I'm interested to see what Gerard comes up with. Sort of, I haven't seen any of the numbers on here, but just have an idea of how we might restore lesser sewage without massive
We're gonna do it. We gotta do it.
I think we have to. The question is how? Without massive.
Evan Swan says, John Knox is today.
Okay, we're gonna reconvene the commission's hearings, and do not be enticed with someone giving you candies to shorten your presentation. We've got two more presenters for the afternoon. And I'm going to call on Mr. Bada Amar to come forward. How did I do pronunciation-wise?
Well, it's Boda Amar.
Boda Amar.
Let me just spit out this candy, though.
Aha, guilty.
Susan. Okay, I'm quitting. You guys just did it in.
All right.
Okay, we're concluding the afternoon session with two more presentations for the Electoral Boundaries Commission. So please, sir, tell us, identify in the microphone your name and the electoral division you live in and which ones you wish to comment on.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Boda Amar. I live in Edmonton, Whitemud.
but I'm commenting on Edmonton Meadows today. I work in the Edmonton Meadows constituency office as a staffer there. I know my colleague Yadvinder Bardwaj was presented yesterday as well, making the case for an additional Edmonton seat based on population data and variance distribution. I'm here today to offer something a little bit different, the operational reality of what these numbers mean on the ground, along with new evidence that strengthens the case that he made as well. So I want to thank the Commission for its thoughtful work, and my comments are offered in alignment with your mandate of effective representation. Before I present the data, I want to emphasize one critical point about this Commission's work. According to Elections Alberta and the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act, the Commission is appointed every 8 to 10 years. The last redistribution was in 2017. And the boundaries you draw today will govern Alberta's elections until approximately 2033 to 2035. So, of course, that's not a short window. That's nearly a decade during which Alberta's population will continue to grow. And, of course, the pressures we're seeing today will only intensify. This means that redistribution can not only reflect where Albertans live today, but it must anticipate where they will live tomorrow. The Commission's interim report emphasizes durability, and I'm here to present evidence that Edmonton's growth trajectory requires more forward-looking seat allocation than currently proposed. Commissioners, I'd like to present data that wasn't included in yesterday's submissions. According to the Alberta government's regional dashboard, using data from the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, Edmonton had 18,384 housing starts in 2024, an increase of 39.4% over 2023. Calgary had 24,369 housing starts in 2024, an increase of 24.5% over 2023. So let me be clear about what this means. While Calgary had more absolute housing starts today, Edmonton's growth rate is nearly 60% faster than Calgary's in terms of housing starts. And of course, housing starts are a leading indicator. They tell us where population pressure is headed, not just where it is today. Every housing start represents future residents, future families, future constituents who will need representation. Yet, the Commission's report proposes giving to Calgary 2 additional seats while giving Edmonton only 1. The most recent Statistics Canada data from January 2026 confirms a trend. From July 2024 to July 2025, Edmonton's growth rate was 3%, while Calgary's was 2.9%. Edmonton is now outpacing Calgary. If we're drawing boundaries that must remain durable for the next 8 to 10 years, we should be accounting for where growth is accelerating, and the data shows that that's Edmonton. I want to give you a window into what these numbers look like from inside a constituency office. Edmonton Meadows and some other Edmonton ridings generally serve some of the most diverse populations in the province. According to the 2021 Canadian Consensus, in the Millwoods Federal Electoral District, which largely corresponds with our area, visible minorities accounted for 55.9% of the population. That's more than double the national average of about 26.4%. And South Asians alone represented 32.4% of the population. Research from Dr. Sandeep Agrawal at the University of Alberta estimates that approximately 85% of residents in this area are immigrants or their immediate descendants. These residents don't just need more quantity of service, they often need more intensive service as well. When a newcomer family comes to our office, they're often navigating multiple systems for the first time. Healthcare, education, immigration, housing. They may not speak English fluently. They may not understand how to access government services. They may not have anyone else to really turn to. Our office becomes their lifeline, and we're often the only resource available to them in their own language. So let me give you a sense of some of the volume. On a typical Friday, our MLA may have between 10 and 20 constituent meetings. Our phones are frequently busy. Our waiting area is sometimes full of people who have just walked into our office seeking help. Constituents sometimes tell us they can't get through, not because we're not trying, of course, but because we often lack the capacity to serve everyone who needs us at all times. MLAs are elected to serve everyone in their constituency, of course, whether they voted for them or not. But when the population is this dense and this diverse and growing this fast, the quality of that representation suffers. So we believe the only structural solution is to reduce the number of people each MLA must serve, and that would mean adding an additional seat in Edmonton. So the Commission's interim report consolidates 6 central Edmonton ridings into 5, effectively taking away a seat. Then it adds 2 new ridings in the south, east, and west. The net result is only 1 additional seat for Edmonton. Meanwhile, Calgary receives 2 new seats within city limits, plus an additional seat in the Airdrie-Cochrane area. Yet according to the Commission's own Appendix E, Edmonton has 7 ridings exceeding over 6% variance above provincial average, and Calgary has only 3. And as of shown, Edmonton's housing starts growth rate is 39.4%, significantly higher than Calgary's 24.5%, and Edmonton's population growth now exceeds Calgary's as well. So the Commission's principles emphasizes durability, and over the next 8 to 10 years, Edmonton's growth will only accelerate relative to Calgary's. So shouldn't Edmonton receive proportional seat allocation? I'm not asking you to take away a seat from any other region. I'm simply asking you to reconsider whether 1 additional seat adequately reflects Edmonton's structural, ongoing, and accelerating growth. To close, Commissioners, the boundaries you draw today will shape Alberta's representation until the mid-2030s. Edmonton's growth is not temporary or speculative. It is structural and accelerating, and the housing starts data and the Statistics Canada figures and the on-the-ground reality for us at the office all point to the same conclusion. So respectfully, I submit that 1 additional seat in Edmonton would strengthen effective and durable representation, not just for today, but for the life of the map. And thank you for your time, Commissioner and Commissioners, and for your service to Albertans.
Well, thank you very much. We want to open it up for some questions, and I should just note the absence of one of our commissioners, which just occurred just as you started to present, Mr. Amar. He has he wears several hats, so he has to be in a special meeting for the next hour, so that explains his absence. Mr. Clark?
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to reiterate, and I believe your MLA had proposed this. Right now, Meadows is about 53,000 population, and Millwoods is about 59,000. The thinking there was on the east side of Meadows, there's a lot of net new growth and building out. And so as you suggest, and to borrow a saying from a great Edmontonian, skate to where the puck is going to be, which is, I think, to summarize part of what you were saying, is let's accommodate for some growth. But you also want Larkspur back. So if we added Larkspur, that would be 6,000 more to you, and Meadows would now be 59 and Millwoods would be 53. The thesis we were working on is Millwoods is mostly built out. Not zero growth, but mostly built out. Meadows is still building out, and so we were leaving the headroom in Meadows. Would you like us still to flip Larkspur into you, or even if we can't add more constituencies, which I know you're asking, yes. How would you reconcile that?
I mean, I would say that that, you know, I'd say that I'd ask the commission to, you know, ensure that the ridings with the highest growth trajectories, I guess, like the ones in the southeast are drawn at the lower end of the variance range to like provide for that extra room. But I just wanted, like, I want to stress that, you know, just from my perspective, the one additional seat isn't asking for special treatment. It's really asking for proportional treatment based on the data. So we think that I would say that an additional seat would help alleviate some of these issues that the commissioners might be having with the map.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Martin?
Oh, thank you very much. We had a lot of fun chatting with your colleague
Yes.
about things like Larkspur and the struggle over getting the population kind of sort of right.
Right.
But you raised two broad issues. One is about the burden of being a constituency officer and the range of queries, even as you gave us an illustration, you know, on a Friday, you
Yes.
know, we can expect X number of humans
Yes.
with Y number of topics. You know, that is entirely true, and the volume of that is a burden on you and your immediate colleagues. But staffing isn't our remit, and we are fully alive to the difficulties that any MLA has with respect to adequate staffing budgets. You know, and to hire enough people, to get adequate premises and equipment, and to perhaps pay performance bonuses or have a salary ladder. All those things are consequent in having budget room.
Yes.
And we are prepared to make very strong recommendations to the legislature about the need to make a more robust and generous members' budget allocation.
Yeah.
So some of your difficulties, we hear you, it's burdensome, but it's a staffing issue.
Two.
That's true, Commissioner Martin, but I also, while I agree with that, I also think that a lot of the issues come to having just one MLA being the only representative for so many people. A lot of times, staff aren't able to simply fill in for the MLA when it comes to important stakeholder events or community events. For example, on a given weekend in Edmonton Meadows, there might be Diwali celebrations, there might be a mosque event for Ramadan, a Sikh Gurdwara function, a community gathering, all happening simultaneously on a given weekend. And of course, the MLA can only be in one place at a time, and we have to pick and choose often, and communities sometimes feel neglected because we simply cannot be present at every event. And of course, having a staffer present helps a little bit, but they need that representation from their MLA. You know, you're right that a lot of the issues can be helped with increased budgets for staff, but we think that the actual population of the ridings matters as well for the MLAs.
Well, point taken, but that's true for every single riding in the province.
Of course.
Yeah.
But
And so we've heard a lot from MLAs and former MLAs of a variety of places that, you know, clearly are rural. And, you know, what I call the laminated stack of governance relations that are required for those MLAs is astounding. Equally as astounding as those you described. So I'm not convinced that we can make much of a distinction on how the MLA's schedule is subdivided. It always will be. I also wanted to just mention the population issue. Yeah, there is some headroom, as my colleague said, in Meadows, but it also exists in 4 of the 5 central Edmonton ridings, all of which are under the provincial mean population. You know, we're alive to the issues of Edmonton's growth, and certainly that of Calgary's. That is why we struggle with trying to accommodate the problems people can foresee in the period 5 to 8 years. You know, we want to try to deal with rates of growth of the coming 2 years at best, because that is something much more tangible to us.
So I just want to say again that, you know, when it comes to our areas where it includes areas of very high diversity and high populations and large numbers of newcomers and new Canadians, that it does add a level of complexity to the MLA's work where he, you know, may not exist in all other areas in the province. And I think that, you know, when it comes to him having to be present at multiple areas, that does also come with, you know, dense, urban, concentrated areas where, you know, various communities coexist and, you know, demand his, you know, his representation and attention. When it comes to, you know, the central Edmonton areas, the ridings, you know, I understand the Commission's rationale that these areas have grown more slowly than the city's periphery. However, I'd note that the net effect, the net effect is Edmonton only gains 1 seat, despite having the fastest growth rate among major cities, according to Statistics Canada.
Well, it had the fastest growth rate.
Right.
We can't predict the future.
Right, and I presented some data where it could help us maybe give us some data on where that might be going, with Edmonton having, you know, some of the over a 3% population growth rate and some of the highest housing starts in the country. So that gives us an idea of where Edmonton's population is going.
Thank you very much for that answer. Ms. Sampson, questions?
Thank you for your presentation. I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Amar, thank you for your presentation.
Of course.
And thank you for the haunting reminder of the fact that what we do continues on to 2034, 35, possibly. Yes. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you for your service and for your work for Albertans.
Yeah, we'll excuse you, and if you can remain for the last presenter, that you're more than welcome to do so. Our last presenter of the afternoon, Mr. Scott Sinclair.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Glad you're here. Yes, thanks for coming.
And off the record, I'll tell you a story about your lapel pin sometime, but
About what, sorry?
your lapel pin. I don't want to occupy the time. So typically we have, we leave 6 minutes for the presenter and 4 minutes for questions, but it's a rule that's honored more in the breach than the observance, Mr. Sinclair, so please proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Justice, and I would appreciate it. I did time this twice, and I made a small amendment, and I'm around 7 minutes the second time, so if there was a minute's grace, I would certainly appreciate it. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name's Scott Sinclair, and I'm the MLA for Lesser Slave Lake. Before I begin, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. I would also like to thank each of the members of this commission for their service on this panel and to the people of Alberta. I'd also like to thank anyone who's taken the time to participate in any fashion of this process, especially those who've joined me in advocating for Lesser Slave Lake and more northern representation. I was incredibly proud to hear last week from Member Sampson that our submissions from the north made up almost 10% of the entire submissions for the entire province. And you can correct me after, but I think you said 100 out of the 1,100 roughly, you know, which is pretty incredible given the size of our area. And it's also why I often repeat the phrase from the Game of Thrones show that the North remembers. I'm aware of the scrutiny and the ramifications of the decisions or life-altering changes that this board will eventually propose to the powers that be. This board's decisions will surely have a lasting impact on the people of Northern Alberta, and each of your names will have an inevitable connection to these aforementioned changes. This public pressure and heavy burden are not easy to wear, but I've seen each of you demonstrate compassion and understanding in previous presentations that I've watched and listened to online, and I'm optimistic that I can appeal to both your hearts and minds here today. which is why I feel compelled to advocate so strongly for the people of Lesser Slave Lake, those who've elected me to fight for them and make sure that they have a strong voice and a seat at the table. My mushum, or grandpa, Sam Sinclair, always told me that decisions were made by those in the room. Wise words that have always stuck with me and are so obvious to me now that I've seen it firsthand as an MLA, which is why the passion and commitment that I'm trying to demonstrate is not meant to offend anyone here today, but to reaffirm to the people I represent that their voices are being heard in a meaningful way, so that any decision being made by the people in these important rooms or fancy buildings should always reflect everyone in this province, no matter how remote or far away they are from them. Quite simply, a life in Northern Alberta is worth just as much as a life in Calgary or Edmonton. Therefore, my specific recommendations will be twofold and concise. Number one, please keep the Lesser Slave Lake riding as is. And number two, I'm pleading with you to not get rid of any seats or ridings in Northern Alberta at all, because it would further dilute the representation, which is already drastically underserved and too often ignored by our neighbors to the south of us. My comments are grounded in the requirements of the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act and in the Commission's own findings in both the 2017 final report and the 2025 interim report. Section 14 of the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act requires the Commission to consider sparsity and density of population, common community interests, geographic features, existing municipal and natural boundaries, and the availability of transportation and communication when drawing electoral divisions. Another important one, Section 15-2 of this Act states that up to 4 proposed electoral divisions may have a population that is as much as 50% below the average population if, in the opinion of the Commission, the nature of the sparsity of the population, the rate of population growth or decline, or other circumstances justify the greater deviation. Not only has Lesser Slave Lake historically met the criteria set out in Sections 14 and 15-2, but because of all the glaring and obvious examples, it feels like this exception was specifically written to protect the riding of Lesser Slave Lake, not delete it. In the 2017 final report, the Commission identified Lesser Slave Lake as one of a limited number of rural northern divisions that warranted a population variance greater than 25% below the provincial average due to geography, sparsity, distance between communities, and the need to ensure effective representation. At the time, the population of Lesser Slave Lake exceeded 40% below the average, and the 2017 Commission maintained the division in recognition of those statutory factors. The 2025 interim report confirms that Northern Alberta continues to experience sparse population distribution, long travel distances, and limited service centers. Those conditions have not materially changed since 2017. In addition to permanent population counts, I believe it's worth noting that our region experiences a significant shadow population that should also be weighed and considered. Shadow population featuring seasonal workers, rotational or shift work employees, wildfire evacuees, previously mentioned by Mayor Frankie from Slave Lake in her submission last week, all put significant stresses on the services and infrastructure of our area. All important details I know this Commission has already heard from other submissions from the north, but they're all relevant to the exceptional status under Section 15-2 of this Act. In closing, it's important to me that this Commission does more than just politely listens to us. Positive intentions and understanding for the plight of Northern Alberta is considered worthless if not supported by meaningful actions. I believe the private citizen from last week's name was Nathan Steinke, and he made an incredible point last week when he said, I'm paraphrasing a bit here, but the exceptions of Section 15-2 should be embraced, not erased. If Lesser Slave Lake does not meet the requirements of exceptional status and 15-2, then quite frankly, I don't even know why it exists. If this Commission recognizes 15-2, it's not just following the rules they're intended, the way they're intended, it's embracing fair representation and acknowledging that the exceptional status for northern ridings brings our communities together instead of driving them apart. No pun intended on the driving part. I know we've been talking about that a lot with northern ridings. Deleting a northern MLA is not just inconveniencing our people, it's erasing northern voices completely. I've spent the better part of my tenure as an MLA advocating or educating colleagues, ministers, on the challenges faced by northerners, and I'm not alone. It's important to mention that all the northern MLAs have been united in their efforts to maintain the status quo, demonstrated recently by their letter of support that they've sent to this commission a couple months ago. That show of unity is not only unprecedented, it's incredibly rare and impactful. That means you have the consensus of all the elected representatives saying to this commission what I hope you now realize. The people of Northern Alberta do not support the proposed changes in the interim report and do not support deleting another MLA. I can't tell you how difficult it is to compile a 6-minute or 7-minute speech that will impact the decision for so many people for the next 7 to 8 years before this issue gets revisited. If this commission does not protect ridings with exceptional status, such as Section 15-2, it's inevitable that we will continue to lose northern MLAs, and the decay of smaller rural communities becomes real and a self-fulfilling prophecy. We could spend endless hours conjuring arguments and specifics on possible changes to the acts, but this commission doesn't need to reinvent the wheel here legally or morally. Somebody already charted a course for you to follow with Section 15-2. Please don't abandon the exceptional status. Embrace it, not just because of the way it's been written, that way in the act, but because it's the fair and right thing to do. The people in this room have the power to change course. You've had the chance to listen. Now it's time to act. Thank you very much.
Mr. Sinclair, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Sampson, do you have any questions
Oh,
or comments?
this is very emotional. You know, you had 8 MLAs right in. It was quite incredible. And when I think about what I heard from around the province, you know, the demise of the riding, it's been personally painful. I can't imagine what it's like for you. I'll leave it at that.
Dr. Martin?
I think I echo all of our opinion about the difficulty of this current boundary, and I think it's well beyond 100 letters that came in, as well as the one, what I call the big northern letter, which all your colleagues had signed, and you in your own letter allude to quite extensively. I think the need for a northern voice, which is key to the key sentiment and motivation for that letter, is heard loud and clear. And we are very much of the mind to reconsider the boundaries that we had put in place. You know, the interim report actually acknowledges that it's interim. And the whole purpose of this second round was to get the input to end up with a better solution. So I'm not stubborn about the boundaries, because some of them we just didn't get right. And this probably is the principal case in point. So we've heard a lot from your colleagues, fellow MLAs, all saying the same thing. But we've heard from each of them and from at least another 10 odd presenters, if not more, in the last couple of weeks, about the granular details of life in the north, transportation challenges, representative challenges for mayors and reeves and day-to-day citizens. So we have learned so much more in the last month than we ever knew about the north. And so you should be proud of that, because it has made a difference. So thank you.
Thank you. If I may briefly respond, I made I'd call them maybe footnotes that aren't really involved in the speech that I think are important to mention. You know, some of them symbolic, some of them real data, and some of them anecdotal, but it was already mentioned, but the Treaty 8 was signed on the south shores of Lesser Slave Lake. Lesser Slave Lake has the highest population percentage of Indigenous people in the province, and right now they have a First Nation MLA that currently represents them. There are 14 Indigenous communities, 11 First Nations, Sawridge, Big Stone, Whitefish, Woodland, Lubicon, Loon Lake, Peerless and Trout, Swan River, Drift Pile, Sucker Creek, Capuano, and 3 Métis settlements, East Prairie, Gift Lake, and Peavine. Also has the historical Pearl Callahazen, who proudly served the Lesser Slave Lake riding from 1989 to 2015, who was the first Métis woman elected to the legislature. And I know she was briefly mentioned last week when I listened to submissions. I also think it's worth mentioning Jennifer Churchill made a really, really thoughtful submission.
She did.
Based on a regional group called ANSA. And I think the really heartbreaking parts of some of these decisions is we were following, and when I say we, I mean the area, not me specifically, it was before I was even an MLA, following the directions of ministers at every meeting we would go to for rural municipalities or at the legislature prior to this, asking us to advocate as a group. So ANSA is the first of its kind, as far as I know, the only one that has First Nations, Métis, counties, and municipalities all advocating together as a consensus. So currently, outside of deleting an MLA in the north, just the redrawing itself is going to basically push everybody back, not quite to zero, but pretty close to it. And a lot of the feedback I've been given that I didn't even share is it's hopeless. There's no point in me coming here today, that they're just going to ignore you no matter what, and we're going to go right back to the way it was before, and everything's going to have to start from scratch. The riding I represent a very diverse one, and to me, when you talk about Section 15-2, which I mentioned in my speech, the harmony of Indigenous and non-Indigenous people working together and having 2 regional hubs, Slave Lake and High Prairie, are really worth mentioning because you got a teacher there from Joussard mentioned that she goes to healthcare appointments in High Prairie and that she grocery shops in Slave Lake. Well, under the Mackenzie County proposed riding, if you look here on the map, if you can see, now I can walk up and point to it, but if you can see where Lesser Slave Lake is, there's the cutout that looks like the open end of a crescent wrench here. Now, there's a lot of communities that right along the south side of the lake. 4 First Nations, so you have Swan River, Sawridge, Drift Pile, Sucker Creek, and the Métis communities, as well as non-Indigenous communities, Joussard, Canusa, Widewater, Canyon Creek. I could go on and on. There's over 30 communities in my riding right now. But all of these communities right now utilize both Slave Lake and High Prairie, and I know the leaders of the communities had a bit of a back and forth on which one was the actual regional hub, but I would tell you that it's one or the other. But there is not a single person, I don't believe, from Joussard or any of these communities that would ever think of driving all the way to High Level, which would be their new center hub, to be able to access services. They'd have to drive through both of the new proposed ridings, through High Prairie one way or through Slave Lake the other. And this is the challenge of when you just stare at a map, as the crow flies, it looks like a straight shot to High Prairie, but there's just no way of getting across that lake. When I first started as an MLA, I had an impromptu visit from the Premier to East Prairie after the fires that destroyed nearly the entire community, and on a day's notice I had to change all my plans. I was supposed to go to Wabasca, which is north of Highway 88, and I was supposed to be there at 1 o'clock, but you hear the Premier's coming, you drop everything, and I made it there for 8 in the morning and met her, and 2 important facts. The chairman at the time, Ray Superno, his name is, who's the chairman, that's the word for chief instead of for Métis councils and communities. He got tear-eyed in the room and pretty emotional because he's a premier never visited East Prairie as far as he knew. Now, I don't know that for a fact, but he said that, or maybe as far as he knew. But that means something to me. So that's a first very important one is how little they see of our elected leaders. And the second one was when I was jockeying my schedule with somebody who worked out of the Edmonton office, they said, don't worry, you could just go straight from East Prairie north up to Big Stone. I'm sure you'll make it there by 12 o'clock. And then I said, facetiously that, like, I don't know if we have a helicopter or a private jet that I don't know about, but I won't be able to get there till the end of the day. So that's one of the most difficult parts already with this riding is I have to choose which side of the lake to go on. And no matter how hard I try and how many miles I put on my truck, which is a lot, you mentioned Minister Williams and how he lives in his truck just like I do, you just can't get there. And going to the same Canada Day, you can go to one side or the other, but you can't do both. So these are real examples and anecdotals from real people. And I think I just want to convey the emotional part. You have lots of data, I think, to review now. But to me, it's the feeling of being ignored. It's almost they've accepted that this is the way they're going to be treated by people in bigger communities. And to me, I think we can do better as elected leaders and as people involved in making these decisions. And it's not a difficult one. It's small things. We mentioned future population with cities. Now, this is not the purview of this panel, but decisions like this have definitely a consequence on it. But I speak a lot about resource revenue mapping because I want to be able to identify for Treasury Board areas that resource leaves our area but doesn't necessarily come back for transportation and infrastructure. Now, I won't get into the politics of any of that, but that is a belief that I don't think people in northern Alberta deserve exceptional status or deserve special treatment. I believe that this is the only way we can grow a balanced population in this province. If we don't have access to healthcare, if we don't have access to roads, it's difficult to divide up that population properly. The Grand Prairie County Reeve was largely in support of leaving it everything the same, and she's seen some growth. And I would say it's not just because of industry and the size of the community, but access to core services in that area. So although it has nothing to do with this panel necessarily, the reason I make these cases is so that if I come here in 8 years and we've got nicer roads and we're delivering healthcare services, then it would make me very happy to say that our population has gone the other way. And we can alleviate some of that population growth that's bottlenecked in Edmonton or Calgary. And I know it doesn't have anything to do with your decision necessarily, but it's, I think, the frame of mind for the way I'd like to see this to go. And then we'd be able to have different conversations here at this table as well. Thank you.
Clark? Yeah, I just want to thank you so much for being here, and also, through you to your community, that we've heard loud and clear that feedback. The feedback was early, it was forceful, it was reasonable and thoughtful. People really did, bring their own perspective as individuals, as citizens, and also as the elected officials, yourself and other elected officials, municipal and provincial. So it really is, it's very meaningful for us. It is an interim report, and that is exactly the purpose of it, to, in essence, as you do an interim report, we're almost asking a question, and the answer has come back pretty definitively as it relates to the north. I wanted to ask you a little more about the south side of the lake, or really just the lake itself. Sure. We've clearly bisected that, and that's been a lot of the feedback that we had received. But maybe can you just tell me a little more about the relationship, the history? I know Treaty 8 was signed on the south side of the lake, but just today, the connectedness and how those communities work together.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So there's the formal connections with groups like ANSA, which is the advocacy groups for bringing communities together to lobby, politicians largely. But the more one big small town is what I say northern Alberta is all the time, and there's nothing more true than the south side of the lake, including Slave Lake and High Prairie. This is just something else I wrote down. When they plan out something as simple as regional events, they'll have rodeos and parades on different weekends because we just don't have enough people, volunteer base, people spending money. And small communities like Canuso, Smith, High Prairie, they all actually have rodeos and they get thousands of people. It's really remarkable. And then we have parades and treaty days at every single one of the First Nations communities. But a lot of them are shared right along the one side of that lake. So right from Highway 2 goes from Slave Lake to Westlock, then north to, from Edmonton to Westlock to Slave Lake, and then it continues west to High Prairie. But all of those communities that I mentioned that are now in the proposed Mackenzie County are all communities that share and live and work together in a common sense way. Now, they also have shared regional groups on the First Nation side and groups like ANSA, but everybody works together, for the most part. I want to pretend it's all peace and harmony. There's obviously disagreements over allocations of resources and everything, but largely people make decisions as if they're one big small town. And it makes it an easy place to represent because the people are so amazing. And lots of times, as long as I give it to them straight, even if it's not the answer they get, they're happy. But I just couldn't foresee a situation where somebody from Jussard or Driftpile, which is in that area you're talking about, I could not imagine the MLA for the Mackenzie County, whoever that ends up being able to service those communities in a meaningful way. It would be just impossible. I believe, Sue, you asked a question to somebody, I can't remember the person on the panel last week, about flying from Lacrete to Calgary. That's just not an option in our riding. That was taken away a long time ago. But even if it wasn't, we don't have regional airports that are easy to get in and out of either. So during Pearl Callahazen's day, she actually did have a few flying communities. I think Garden River might have been one of them. So just in regards to the opposite argument or the counterpoint, I won't mention his name, but I had a conversation off the record with a Calgary MLA at the Calgary Stampede the first year I was elected. He told me he's just amazed by how much driving we have to do in our area, because I was trying to explain to him. He asked how long it took me to get to Calgary, and I said, well, it took 8 hours, because I was in a Treaty Day celebration in the morning at the Woodland Cree First Nation, which is 3 hours from Slave Lake, which is my hometown. So you're another 6 hours from there from Calgary. Now, don't double check my math. I speed a little bit in my truck sometimes, but he was saying he could probably walk or bike ride his riding in less than 8 hours. Now, to me, that is a perfect example of why the exception for 15-2 exists, is no more, no less. I heard all the points from the gentleman before me about urban representation and the sprawl and the growth, and I understand all of that. But it's just very difficult to be able to not ignore somebody if they're that far away over such a short period of time, with roads and access to internet is another one. I don't get phone service in some areas. I have a booster and a Starlink, but there's just some areas where I have to wait, like in Husky and Fawcett Lake. I'm not sure if anyone knows, between Slave Lake and Edmonton is where I do a lot of Zoom meetings, because I start driving because I got to get somewhere, but I know that I'm going to lose somebody. And everybody's polite the first couple times on a Zoom meeting, but by third time they're kind of fed up. So I just sit at the side of the road at the truck stop there and do a lot of the business of the day, and then I get to where I'm going, and usually it's nighttime. So those are realities that I know every rural MLA faces. My only point, I guess, is that it just doesn't need to be any more difficult. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Sinclair. I do have a couple of points I'd like to just clarify. First of all, it's my assessment of what we read and what we heard last week from the north was that it was bipartisan. It was everybody rose in the same direction up there, and it, no matter what political side they are on. Kind of reminds me of the old joke, why do grandchildren and grandparents get along so well? Common enemy. And and to some extent, you're in a part of the province where you all, and in fact, Ms. Churchill may have described it, everybody works together because you have no choice. You've got common distances, you've got challenges of roads and all those things. So your position is to keep Lesser Slave Lake intact as it is now under the 2017 boundaries, correct?
Yes, sir.
No change, no tinkering or moving around the edges. You're not really concerned about bringing in new territory or taking some out?
If there was, if I'm allowed some latitude on kind of, I've only heard brief conversations and some of the other submissions on this, but based on the feedback I've heard, there are areas, if we were needed to add to the riding to gain a population where the deviation was closer. If you asked, I'm a hard, please don't touch it, and please don't delete a northern MLA at all, would be my position. However, if we needed to add some population, there's a lot more similarities to Swan Hills. There's lots of people that work in the House Mountain area. My dad commuted and lived in Swan Hills, and it's only an hour from Slave Lake. So a lot of the shared lived and work, there's a lot more in common. I could tell you the opposite would be true of, this is no slight against anybody from Saddle Lake, but I don't believe there would be, but anyone from Slave Lake that goes through Saddle Lake or vice versa. People from Saddle Lake don't come to Slave Lake, I don't think, or Westlock or Barhead. to access any core services. Now, I mean, I'll say that here on the record, and then 3 people might phone in, but out of the amount of people that live in there, common sense wise, it's just not something that's tethered together in a meaningful way at all. I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Okay, and I think we universally appreciated the presentations from, I think it was the mayor of Lesser Slave Lake, Ms. Churchill, is it Jennifer?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Mike Evans?
Yeah, and
They-
Ken Matthews.
They really stick in my mind, their presentations, for their, their clarity, their professionalism, and just raising the need as you have. I want to ask a bit of a comparative question, and this doesn't come up very often, but I am in the process of preparing the narrative for the final report already, and I'm looking at Saskatchewan as, each jurisdiction is different. I've actually looked at Northern Ontario, and I'm looking at Saskatchewan. Have you as a legislator, have you looked at how they operate in Saskatchewan? And it affects Section 15.2, the ridings, and all kinds of things.
I have examined, I would say more of what I would call alternative options for the way I might propose drawings.
Okay.
If there was a separate meeting where we were sure that we were losing a riding. I've been very hesitant to go down that road because I want the people that I represent to know that I'm here to do exactly what they told me to do, which is we don't want to lose a northern MLA. So it's very difficult for me to go to examine alternative. I mean, obviously you have the burden of having to make these decisions. I'd be open to sitting down with anybody on interprovincial matters. I think that's important, and in our position as MLAs and ministers, we do it all the time. It's I think, a great yardstick to be able to use, yeah.
Now, and I would say compare and contrast, because Saskatchewan is very different than Northern Alberta, very different. But they have taken an approach to just say, okay, legislatively, you're not touching the 2 northern ridings, and here they are, irrespective of population. And we live in an unusual world where we have more limited transportation in the north than we did, I'd say, 25 years ago. Commercial air travel is history, as I understand it, in the north, where it used to be quite common before. So we have a better road system, I guess, in northern Alberta than Saskatchewan, but now we're undergoing far less air travel availability. I say all that to say, and I want to go back, and if you haven't read Appendix D to the report, which provides the history of electoral boundaries in Alberta, and often politicians are accused of self-interest, and that's one of the reasons we've moved to independent commissions over the last 20 plus years. But in the early 90s, I think it's the early 90s, late 80s or early 90s, there was a legislative commission that did a lot of work, and it's called the Bogle Commission because Bob Bogle chaired it. And I tell you, that commission historically has done a lot of work that has impacted what we do now. And it kind of arose at about the same time as the Saskatchewan reference came out of the Supreme Court of Canada, and of course we were just learning about what the Charter says, or what the Supreme Court says about the Charter for Section 3. And that legislative commission actually did they went to Winnipeg, they consulted with Manitoba legislatures, Manitoba electoral officers, they did the same in Regina and Saskatchewan, did the same in Victoria. And I have to say that it's unfair to tar that legislative committee with the same brush that often politicians get tarred with. They did incredible, groundbreaking work that influences us, and the essence of the commission, the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act comes from that. Section 15.2 comes from that, and each jurisdiction, it seems, has created their own little niche area to protect the north and provide for effective representation. So I say all that to say that I may want to talk to my commissioners and talk about some groundwork for the legislators to do in the next 8 years, because you're the people on the ground, and maybe it's time to do a bit more work like that.
I appreciate that, and
I know
if-
that's out of left field, but.
No, I don't mind I actually appreciate the open communication. A couple things, if I may. One is the very fact that this commission, is having to make a decision on the secondary report here in Edmonton instead of our area of Slave Lake, when we're one of the ridings that are most impacted by being deleted. I think it says a lot about the difficulty in representing that area right now. You guys are going out under a very tight timeline to try and propose a report back before the legislative session begins, and then to be able to make a fair and bipartisan decision before then. And I've also lived in Saskatchewan and played junior hockey there, so I got a big love for their community. Yorkton Terriers and Estevans.
Oh, okay. That's
Yorkton Terriers.
near my hometown.
Yeah.
Where I- okay.
Saskatchewan reminds me a lot of Northern Alberta, though, the way they band together and that one big small town theme that I mentioned.
Yep.
It boggles the mind, actually. If you go there, they love the Rough Riders, but they don't have an NHL team. So whatever the SJHL team is fully supported by the entire community. Melville's 20 kilometers from Yorkton, and they both have junior A teams with different fan bases and sponsorship groups. Now, I don't want to get off, I'm a politician, I don't mean to, but I could be here till 6 o'clock. What I was just trying to say is, in terms of points of reference, I watch a lot of TV. I'm not formally educated, but I love The West Wing, and I like all movies, regarding politics. One of the reasons I got into it. But they mention the founding fathers all the time, and I think when you think about whoever it was, and I don't even know the name, so excuse me, but thought of Section 15.2, and thought of putting in exceptions for ridings in northern Alberta. I think they were foreseeing what was already happening here with growth in the urban communities, and they understood, just like we mentioned it to the gentleman before about the forward-thinking Dr. Martin, that you mentioned back to him as well, and trying to predict where it was going. Well, to me, effective bipartisan people who care about Northern Alberta, party politics aside, Danielle Lervy, the former minister, the MLA who represented the NDP from 2015 to 2019, I think she probably came before this community and largely was able to get them to change their minds, or at least respect Section 15.2 at that time, even in an area that's largely conservative. But she knew it was the right thing to do for Northern Alberta. I could only imagine, and I don't want to speak for her, obviously, but the partisan politics that you mentioned could have been very prevalent for her to be able to add another urban riding. Now, I think she put the people of Northern Alberta and the people of Lesser Slave Lake first, and I'm grateful for that. And I say that as somebody who represents, the conservative side of politics. Now, I'm an independent member, so I would say the same thing. Whether this hurts my place personally or my career personally, it was important for me to speak out in the legislature and on Facebook and any other means I had necessary, because that's what I ran on, and that's what people asked me to do. Traveling to commissions like this is impossible. I know you had a small turnout, and we just have traditional newspapers now to let people know, but it's difficult to get people out when they're not driving to work 2.5 hours one way sometimes, there and back. At the end of the day, they come home at 7 and they're rushing to the rink, and they get home, and it's a crazy rat race of a different kind than the people who live in cities. So, the last thing I'd mention that I forgot to mention earlier that is an anecdotal was I advocate strongly, and it was one of my positions as the parliamentary secretary for Indigenous policing at the time, but you hear all these anecdotal stories, but one of them was about 911 call. Now, it was from the Woodland Cree First Nation, and it took 6 hours for police to show up, and this elder had to sit with this grandson for 5 hours because the kid just bled out from a stab wound. And that's a perfect snapshot of the difficulties. And again, I know it's not related to this panel, of all of the real world experiences that we face that are completely different from, arguing over a 25 to 30 minute turnaround time at a 911 call in an apartment building in downtown Edmonton. So those have a direct correlation into the real things that matter to people up there. And I know I could have found a bunch of legal points probably, but I think you guys have all the information in front of you regarding precedent and roughly where to go with this. So that's why it was important for me to try and attack a little bit of the heart, not just the mind. So sorry for the long answer.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Sinclair. Much appreciated. We will now adjourn the afternoon proceedings and reconvene this evening at 6 o'clock,
Thank you very much.
or 5:30.